My name is Tessa Palmer, and I'm 32 years old. I was standing on my grandfather's porch holding a cedar chest he'd built me when I was 10, and the front door was already locked. My parents had changed the deadbolt before the flowers on his casket had wilted. They thought they'd gotten everything. The house, the land, the bank accounts. Every piece of a life Harold Palmer spent 60 years building. They didn't know about the $20 million he'd left me in an irrevocable trust, and I'm glad I kept it a secret. Because what happened 7 days later changed everything I thought I knew about my own family. But here's what none of them knew. My grandfather had been building one last thing before he died, and he'd built it for me. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. This is the place where family truths come to light one story at a time. If this story hits close to home, drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe. Now, let me take you back to where it started. Harold James Palmer built Palmer & Sons Construction from a single pickup truck and a set of borrowed hand tools. He was 22 when he framed his first house in the Shenandoah Valley, 25 when he hired his first crew, and by the time he was 50, his company had built half the new homes between Stanton and Waynesboro. He sold the business at 72 but kept the land and the office, a cinder block building on Route 250 with his name painted over the door in letters he'd stenciled himself. I grew up in that office. Every summer from age 14, I sat at the metal desk in the back room and balanced his books. Receipts for lumber, invoices for concrete. The smell of sawdust clung to every surface, sweet and warm like the man himself. Grandpa taught me to read a balance sheet the same way he taught me to measure a board twice, carefully, because mistakes cost money and trust costs more. When his Parkinson's diagnosis came, late stage, already progressing, I was the one who drove to his house every morning. I helped him eat. I read him the Stanton Newsleader. I reconciled his accounts on his kitchen table while he dozed in the recliner. My parents were too busy. That's what they said. My mother, Linda, had her own reasons for staying away, but I didn't understand that yet. My father, Robert, showed up on Sundays sometimes and stood in the doorway like a man visiting a stranger. 3 years I did this. 3 years of feeding him soup and filing his taxes and watching the strongest man I'd ever known shrink into his chair. The day before he died, he pressed his pocket watch into my hand, sterling silver, worn smooth. Keep time for me, kiddo. I've worn it in my jacket pocket every day since. The funeral was at First Methodist in Stanton. 200 people filled the pews, old carpenters who'd worked Grandpa's crews, neighbors, the woman from the hardware store who'd sold him nails for 40 years. I sat in the third row, not the first. Linda had arranged the seating. She stood at the front in a black dress and her mother's pearls, accepting condolences like she'd earned them. Harold would have wanted us to stay strong, she told Mrs. Bowden, the neighbor who'd lived across the street from Grandpa for 31 years. Robert stood beside Linda, gray suit, gray face, hands folded. He looked like a man attending his own sentencing. My cousin, Derek, drove in from Charlottesville in a rental car, new suit, hair freshly cut. He shook hands like a real estate agent working an open house, which is exactly what he was. Nobody asked me to speak. I'd spent 3 years at Grandpa's bedside, and nobody thought to hand me a microphone. After the service, the reception was in the church basement. Deviled eggs and sweet tea and people saying, "He's in a better place." I was standing near the coffee urn when I heard Linda talking to Mrs. Bowden. She didn't lower her voice. She didn't need to. "Grandpa just felt sorry for you, Tessa. That's the only reason you were ever here." I heard every syllable over the hum of the coffee maker and the murmur of 200 people pretending death was manageable. I didn't react. I wrapped my hand around the pocket watch in my jacket and squeezed until the winding crown pressed a circle into my palm. Derek found me by the coat rack 10 minutes later. He put his hand on my shoulder like we were close. "Listen, cuz, the family's got plans for the house. You should probably start packing your things from Grandpa's room." 2 days after the funeral, I drove to Grandpa's house to collect my things. The deadbolt was new, brass, still shiny. Linda was standing on the porch with a cardboard box at her feet. "I packed what's yours," she said. She smiled the way people smile when they're handing you a parking ticket. The box held a few changes of clothes, 2 paperbacks, my old college notebooks, and the cedar chest Grandpa had made me when I was 10. He'd planed the wood himself in his workshop, sanded it until the grain was silk, and carved my initials into the lid, TAP inside. I'd kept pencils, old report cards, a photo of Grandpa and me at the county fair. Linda's voice was sweet. "The house is part of the estate now. Robert and I are handling everything. It's what your grandfather would have wanted." Behind the screen door, Robert stood holding a coffee mug. His hand trembled, not from grief, from something else. Something I'd recognize later. He wouldn't look at me. Mrs. Bowden was across the street watering her hydrangeas. She stopped and watched. She didn't wave. She just stood there with the hose running, and I knew she saw everything. I picked up the box, tucked the cedar chest under my arm. "I'll need the rest of my things," I said. Linda tilted her head. "There is no rest." I loaded the box into my Civic and drove 25 minutes east on Route 250 to my apartment in Harrisonburg. Apartment 3B, 600 square feet above a dry cleaner. The cedar chest rode on the passenger seat. When I parked, I checked my phone. One missed call from a 540 area code, no voicemail. I didn't call back yet. Grandpa had told me to wait. 6 months before he died, Grandpa called me into his workshop. He was in the wheelchair by then, hands curled, but his eyes were the same, sharp, patient, measuring. "I need you to listen," he said. "Don't write this down. Don't tell anyone." He told me about the trust. An irrevocable trust set up 15 years earlier with an attorney named Margaret Caldwell in Richmond. $20 Snort's million investments, bonds, the proceeds from selling Palmer and Sons, rental income from commercial properties he'd held quietly for decades. I was the sole beneficiary. I remember my mouth going dry. $20 million. The man who wore the same flannel shirt 3 days a week had built $20 million and told nobody. "That's my whole life," he said, "and I'm giving it to the only person who earned it." I tried to argue. He raised one trembling hand. "Margaret will contact you after I'm gone. She'll explain the rest. Until then, you say nothing. Not to Robert, not to Linda, not to anyone. The rest," I asked. He looked at the pocket watch on the workbench. "You'll understand when it's time." Back in my apartment 2 days after the eviction, I sat on my bed and stared at the cedar chest. I knew about the trust. I knew it was safe. Irrevocable meant nobody could touch it. Not Linda, not a probate judge, not anyone. But I didn't know what the rest meant. I picked up my phone and dialed the 540 number. "Voicemail. This is Margaret Caldwell's office. Please leave a message." I hung up. Grandpa had said to wait for her, so I waited. The pocket watch sat on my nightstand ticking. Linda moved fast. 3 days after the funeral, she filed a petition at the Augusta County Circuit Court claiming Grandpa had died effectively intestate, that his will, if one existed, had been lost or destroyed. She signed a sworn affidavit stating that no trust or supplementary estate documents existed to her knowledge. Robert co-signed. His handwriting on the form was shaky, the R in Robert trailing off like it wanted to escape the page. Derek was already working the real estate angle. I found out later, through court filings, that he'd initiated the transfer of 2 parcels of Grandpa's land months before the funeral. A 5-acre plot in Waynesboro appraised at $280,000, a commercial lot on Greenville Avenue in Stanton worth $140,000. Both transfers listed Harold J. Palmer as grantor and Linda S. Palmer as grantee, notarized by a man named Kevin Rudd. I learned about the probate filing from Mrs. Bowden. She called me on a Thursday evening, her voice careful. "Honey, I saw your mother at the courthouse today. She filed some papers. I thought you should know." I thanked her, hung up, sat at my kitchen table, and pressed my palms flat on the surface. The CPA and me understood exactly what was happening. Every day Linda moved forward was a day assets disappeared into her name. I could have called a lawyer. I could have filed an objection. But Grandpa had said, "Wait for Margaret." 5 days I sat with that. 5 days of watching the clock and trusting a dead man's instructions over my own professional instincts. On the 6th day, my phone rang. Area code 540. This time, someone was on the other end. Before I tell you about that call, I need to go back 1 year. Grandpa was still alive. I was sitting at his kitchen table, laptop open, reconciling his monthly accounts the way I'd done every month for 3 years. 2 charges caught my eye, $12,000 and $8,000. Both labeled Medicare supplemental processing fee. I flagged them. "Linda, what are these?" She was standing at the counter, pouring iced tea like she belonged there. She didn't hesitate. "Medicare reimbursement fees. The new supplemental plan has processing charges. I handled it with the billing office." I checked. There was a Medicare supplemental plan code that matched. The invoice formatting looked legitimate. Letterhead, provider NPI number, date of service. I let it go. A year later, sitting in my Harrisonburg apartment with 3 years of Grandpa's financial records on my laptop, I looked again. This time, I sorted by description and filtered for the word processing. 17 charges across 18 months. 12,000 here, 8,000 there, 6,500, 9,200. The amounts varied just enough to look organic. The total was $167,000. No Medicare supplemental plan charges processing fees 17 times. Nobody does. Linda hadn't just lied to me once. She'd built a system. I pulled up the authorization forms for each charge. Every one carried Robert's signature, clean, steady, nothing like the tremor I'd watched worsen over 3 years. The same hand that shook holding a coffee mug at the funeral had signed 6 figures worth of transfers without a single wobble. My phone rang. 5:40. I picked up before the second ring. Margaret Caldwell's voice was the kind of calm that comes from 30 years of delivering bad news in wood-paneled offices. "Tessa, I'm sorry for the delay. Your grandfather instructed me to wait 7 days after his passing before contacting you. I have documents he prepared. We need to meet in person. Is this about the trust?" I asked. "The trust is the beginning," she said. "There's more." She gave me an address in Richmond. A time. Tomorrow morning, 10:00. I wrote it on the back of a grocery receipt because my hands needed something to do. "Margaret," I said, "my mother filed a probate petition. She's claiming Grandpa died without a will." There was a pause. The kind of pause that tells you someone already knew. "We'll discuss that tomorrow." She said, "Bring the cedar chest." I set the phone down. The pocket watch was ticking on my nightstand, steady as a heartbeat that didn't belong to anyone alive. I packed a bag. Put the cedar chest in the passenger seat of my Civic. Set my alarm for 5:00 a.m. Richmond was 2 hours east on I-64. Through the Blue Ridge, past Charlottesville where Derek sold houses to people who trusted him, past the exits for small towns where people still settled disputes with handshakes and paperwork. Grandpa had been a paperwork man. Receipts for every board, contracts for every job. He told me once, standing in his workshop with sawdust on his boots, "People lie, Tessa. Numbers don't." I drove to Richmond the next morning. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I sat in that car for 3 hours thinking about every time I balanced Grandpa's books, every suspicious number I'd flagged and then let go. If you've ever had that gut feeling about someone in your family, that quiet voice saying something isn't right, stay with me. Because what Margaret showed me the next day proved that sometimes the numbers don't lie, even when people do. Margaret Caldwell's office was on the 2nd floor of a converted townhouse on Grace Street in Richmond. Bookshelves floor to ceiling, leather chairs, a desk with a brass lamp that probably cost more than my rent. Margaret herself was about 65, silver hair pulled back, gold-rimmed glasses, hands that moved with precision when she opened the folder. "Your grandfather hired me 15 years ago to establish and manage his trust," she said. "But 2 years before he died, he asked me to do something unusual. He asked me to hire a forensic accountant. The accountant's name was Ray Mitchell." Margaret slid his report across the desk. 47 pages, bound with exhibits. I opened it and the CPA in me took over. My eyes tracked the columns before my brain caught up. Linda had moved $342,000 from Grandpa's personal accounts into 3 separate accounts over 28 months. One in her name, one in Robert's name, one under a shell company called Palmer Family Holdings, LLC. Linda listed as sole member. The mechanism was elegant in a way that made my stomach turn. Fake vendor names, fake W-9 forms, invoices generated on a home computer with metadata timestamps that matched Linda's laptop. 17 Medicare processing fees were just the start. There were also property maintenance assessments, estate planning consultation fees, and a recurring charge labeled skilled nursing coordination that went to a P.O. box registered to Derek's real estate office. "Your grandfather couldn't stop her," Margaret said. By the time Ray finished the audit, Harold's Parkinson's had progressed past the point where he could sign documents or testify. He couldn't fight her in court. She paused. But he could prepare someone who could. Margaret slid a second folder across the desk. The second folder was thinner, 6 pages, a lab letterhead I didn't recognize. Margaret folded her hands. "Your grandfather ordered this test 18 months ago. A cheek swab he provided to his physician compared against Robert's medical records from a routine physical." She let me read it. The summary was 3 lines. 3 lines that rearranged everything I thought I knew. Robert Allen Palmer was not the biological child of Harold James Palmer. Probability of paternity, 0.01%. Margaret spoke carefully. "Your grandmother Gloria was pregnant when she and Harold married. Harold knew. Gloria confessed before the wedding. He married her anyway and raised Robert as his own son." I stared at the lab seal. The room was very quiet. "Harold never held it against Robert," Margaret continued. "He loved your father." But 3 years ago, when Linda started moving money, Harold realized something he hadn't wanted to face. Robert knew. He'd known since he was 18. Gloria told him on her deathbed, and Linda discovered the secret early in their marriage. She used it. Used it how? Leverage. Every time Robert hesitated, every time he questioned a document she put in front of him, Linda reminded him that one phone call could tell the world Harold Palmer's only son wasn't really his son. Robert signed whatever she asked because he was terrified of losing the only identity he'd ever had. I set the folder down. My father wasn't my grandfather's blood, but Grandpa had chosen him anyway. Chosen to marry Gloria, chosen to raise Robert, chosen to give him his name and his company and 40 years of patience. And Robert had repaid that choice by handing the keys to a woman who stripped the house while the old man was still breathing. Margaret said, "There was one more thing in the folder." "Did Harold give you a wooden chest?" Margaret asked. "Cedar, hand-planed, about this size." She held her hands apart, the exact dimensions of the chest sitting in my passenger seat. I nodded. "Check the bottom panel," she said. "There's a false bottom. Harold built it himself." I drove back to Harrisonburg folders on my passenger seat and the cedar chest balanced on top of them. My apartment was quiet. Late afternoon light came through the window above the kitchen sink, making the dust particles look like snow. I set the chest on my bed, opened it, took out the pencils, the old report cards, the county fair photo. Grandpa and me 2004 standing beside a blue ribbon tomato that wasn't even ours. I ran my fingers along the bottom panel. Cedar, smooth as skin. Then I found the seam, a hairline crack along the left edge that didn't match the grain. I pressed. The panel shifted. A 1/4 inch of hidden space underneath. The smell hit me first. Sawdust, not stale. It smelled like his workshop, like he'd sanded something just yesterday and packed the shavings in as insulation. There were 2 items in the false compartment. A sealed envelope, heavy cream paper, the flap secured with a circle of red wax. The kind Grandpa used to seal letters when he was being formal, which was almost never. And a small key, brass, unmarked. The kind that fits a safety deposit box. I broke the wax seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper in Grandpa's blocky handwriting. Bank of Clark County, Stanton Branch, Box 1147, use the key. 4 lines, no explanation. Just instructions from a man who measured twice and never wasted a word. I held the key up to the light. It was warm from being inside the cedar. Grandpa had spent his whole life building things. Houses, companies, a family that didn't deserve him. Even in death, he was still building. One layer at a time. Linda didn't slow down. While I was driving to Richmond and back, she filed a motion in Augusta County requesting the court freeze all known estate assets. Grandpa's house, the 2 parcels of land she'd already transferred into her name, and any bank accounts still listed under Harold J. Palmer. Derek submitted a sworn affidavit supporting the motion. As a licensed real estate professional and family member, I can confirm the property transfers reflected Harold Palmer's expressed wishes. Licensed, professional, family. He managed to be wrong about all 3. The summons arrived at my apartment by certified mail on a Friday. I had 30 days to respond or forfeit my right to contest. I called Margaret. They're moving fast. They have to, she said. The trust is irrevocable. Once the court sees it, their probate claim collapses. They're racing to liquidate before anyone looks closely. Then we need to look first. Margaret introduced me to Diana Walsh, an estate litigation attorney based in Stanton who specialized in probate disputes and fiduciary breach. Diana was in her 50s, short hair, reading glasses on a chain, the kind of woman who kept a legal pad within arm's reach at all times. We met at her office the following Monday. I brought everything: Ray Mitchell's forensic report, the DNA results, Harold's handwritten note from the sedarchist, and the key I hadn't used yet. Diana read the forensic report in 20 minutes. She took off her glasses. This isn't a family dispute, she said. This is financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. It's a crime. She looked at the key in my palm. And what does that open? I don't know yet. Diana picked up her phone. Then we'd better find out. I took a leave of absence from the accounting firm. My boss, Jan, didn't ask questions. Family stuff. Take what you need. She'd watched me leave early for 3 years to drive to Grandpa's house. She understood. Diana filed subpoenas for bank records from People's Bank of Virginia, Grandpa's personal accounts, Linda's accounts, and Palmer Family Holdings, LLC. The records arrived in 2 bankers' boxes. I carried them up to my apartment and spread them across the kitchen table like a crime scene, which is exactly what they were. I sorted by date, filtered by amount, cross-referenced against the invoices in Ray Mitchell's report. The pattern was textbook structuring. Linda had broken her transfers into amounts just under $10,000 to avoid triggering currency transaction reports. $8,900 here, $9,700 there. 14 separate transactions below the reporting threshold, a different account each time. Total misappropriated through Harold's personal accounts, $342,000. Total routed through Palmer Family Holdings, LLC, $78,000. Grand total, $420,000. That wasn't carelessness. That was Wasarkikshire. I worked for 6 days straight. Coffee at 2:00 a.m., spreadsheets on every surface. I mapped every dollar from origin to destination. Harold's account to fake vendor to Linda's holding company to personal checking. A closed loop with his signature forged on every authorization form. Diana called on the 6th night. Can you trace every dollar to a final deposit? Already done, I said. Then it's time to use that key. Bank of Clark County, Stanton branch. I walked in on a Tuesday morning with the brass key and my driver's license. The teller led me to the vault, box 1147. The key fit clean. No resistance, no drama. Inside the box was a thick manila envelope and a thin layer of sawdust on the metal floor. Sawdust. He'd put it there on purpose. The envelope held 3 things. The original trust document, notarized, signed by 3 witnesses, dated 15 years earlier when Grandpa could still swing a hammer. A certified copy of the DNA results, chain of custody documented. And 4 pages of handwriting I would have recognized anywhere. Blocky capitals, the penmanship of a man who'd spent his life filling out work orders. Harold's letter. I sat down in the private viewing room, closed the door, and read it. He wrote about Gloria. About the day she told him Robert wasn't his, about marrying her anyway because he'd already decided the kind of man he wanted to be. I knew the day he was born. Gloria told me before the wedding, and married her anyway. I raised Robert as my own, not because I had to, because I chose to. He wrote about Linda, about watching her charm his son, and then slowly, methodically dismantle the financial safeguards he'd spent decades building, about the Parkinsons that stole his ability to fight back. She's been taking from me for years. I could have stopped her earlier maybe, but I was afraid. Afraid that if I confronted Robert, he'd have to choose between his wife and his father, so I chose for him. I chose to protect my granddaughter instead. Then the line I carry with me: blood doesn't make you family. What you do when nobody's watching does. His final instruction was simple: use everything in this box to protect what I built. Not for revenge, for truth. I folded the letter, put it back in the envelope. At the bottom of the safety deposit box, the sawdust shavings caught the fluorescent light. They smelled like his workshop, like every summer of my childhood. I sat in that room for 40 minutes. Then I drove home and got to work. The property transfers were public record. Augusta County Clerk's Office online portal. Free to search. I pulled the deeds for both parcels. The 5-acre plot in Waynesboro and the commercial lot on Greenville Avenue. Both listed Harold J. Palmer as grantor, Linda S. Palmer as grantee. Transfer dates: 4 months before Grandpa died. Notarized by Kevin Rudd, Notary Public, commission number 7,843,291. I searched Kevin Rudd. He worked at Whitfield Realty Group in Charlottesville, Derek's office, Derek's employee. Grandpa's medical records, which Margaret had obtained through the trust's legal authority, showed that by the date of those transfers, his Parkinson's had progressed to the point where he could not reliably grip a pen. His neurologist's notes from that month read: patient exhibits significant resting tremor in both hands. Fine motor tasks, including writing, are no longer achievable independently. Signatures on the transfer deeds were steady, fluid, no tremor. Not the hands of a man with late-stage Parkinson's. Diana hired a forensic handwriting analyst, Dr. Carol Fenton, certified by the American Board of Forensic Document Examiners. Her report took 2 weeks. The questioned signatures are inconsistent with known exemplars of Harold J. Palmer's handwriting from the corresponding time period. The tremor patterns present in authenticated samples are entirely absent from the questioned documents. Derek's commission records, obtained through subpoena, showed he received a $42,000 consulting fee from Palmer Family Holdings, LLC in the same quarter as the transfers. 3 people, 3 roles. Linda was the architect. Derek was the contractor. And my father was the one who unlocked the door. I drove to Stanton on a Saturday, not to the house. I had no reason to go there. I went to Palmer and Sons Construction, the old office on Route 250. The business had been sold years ago, but Grandpa kept the building. It was empty now, locked, but Robert's truck was in the gravel lot. He was sitting inside the old office, the one with Grandpa's name still stenciled on the window. Beer on the desk, old crew photos on the wall, young men in hard hats standing in front of framed houses, grinning. Robert looked up when I walked in. He didn't ask how I got in. The side door hadn't locked properly since 1997. "You shouldn't be here," he said. His voice was tired, not hostile, just spent. "Know about the transfers, Dad." He looked at the beer bottle, peeled the label with his thumbnail. "I'm not asking you to turn on her," I said. "I'm asking you to tell me one thing. Did you know?" A long pause. The fluorescent light above us buzzed. Robert finished the beer, set the bottle down with the precision of a man who'd been drinking since noon. "I signed what she told me to sign." Another pause. I didn't know how much. Half-truth. I could hear it in the way his voice dropped on how much. The emphasis was wrong, like a witness who'd rehearsed only part of the script. "And Grandpa?" I asked. "Did you know about don't?" He cut me off. One word, sharp like a nail gun. I stood there for another minute. The photos on the wall showed a man who used to build things alongside his father. The man in front of me had let someone else tear them down. I left, drove back to Harrisonburg. The numbers would say what he wouldn't. I stood in that empty office, surrounded by photos of a company my grandfather built with his own hands, and I realized something. The fraud wasn't just about money. It was about erasing him, erasing everything he'd built and everyone he'd trusted. If you've ever watched someone's legacy get dismantled by the people who should have protected it, you know exactly why I couldn't walk away. Diana's office had a whiteboard. By the time we were done, it looked like a conspiracy documentary. Red lines connecting names to accounts, blue lines connecting accounts to properties, green lines marking the timeline. Here's the strategy, Diana said. Step 1, we file an objection to Linda's probate petition and present the irrevocable trust. That removes the $20 million from the estate entirely. Step 2, we present the forensic accounting evidence to invalidate the property transfers. Forged signatures, fraudulent notarization, fiduciary breach under the power of attorney. Step 3, we refer the criminal evidence to the Augusta County Commonwealth Attorney. She tapped the DNA folder. And this, the DNA doesn't disqualify Robert from inheriting. Harold raised him. Legally, he's Harold's son regardless of biology. But it destroys their credibility. Linda and Robert's entire probate claim rests on the argument that they're Harold's only real family, and I'm just the granddaughter who visited sometimes. The DNA shows that the person they're calling Harold's rightful heir isn't his biological child, and the person Harold actually chose to trust his legacy to is sitting in this chair. I stared at the whiteboard. I don't want to destroy my father. Then we focus on Linda and Derek. Robert's involvement level will emerge naturally during proceedings. If he cooperated passively, the court will take that into account. She paused. But Tessa, you need to be prepared. When this goes to hearing, everything comes out. The fraud, the transfers, the DNA, and your father will be sitting 10 FT away. I know. Are you sure? The pocket watch ticked in my jacket. Grandpa's letter said truth, not revenge. I was sure. Linda showed up at my apartment on a Wednesday. No call, no warning. Just her sedan parked in the lot next to the dry cleaner and a sharp knock on my door. Derek was in the passenger seat, engine running. I opened the door. Linda was wearing lipstick and a practiced expression, concerned, maternal, the face she put on for neighbors and notaries. Honey, I know this has been hard on all of us, but your father and I think it's best if we handle the estate together as a family. Margaret Caldwell is handling Grandpa's affairs, I said. Linda's face changed. The name hit her like a cold draft. She recovered in about 2 seconds. Impressive, really. Margaret retired years ago, she didn't. Linda tried a different angle, the concerned tilt of the head, the softened voice. Your grandfather wouldn't want lawyers tearing this family apart, Tessa. He always said family comes first. Grandpa is the one who hired the lawyer. The practiced expression slipped. Underneath it was something hard and bright, like the edge of a blade catching light. You don't know what you're starting, she said. I know exactly what I'm starting. She left. I watched from the window as she got in the car. Derek leaned over to say something. Linda shook her head. Derek made a phone call as they pulled out of the lot. I turned back to the kitchen table. 2 bankers' boxes of records, 47 pages of forensic accounting, a handwriting expert's report, a DNA lab analysis, a letter from a dead man who built houses and kept promises. 3 days later, I got the court date. 2 weeks before the hearing, Diana and I ran through the exhibits one more time. 47 pages of bank records, 11 documents with forged signatures, property transfer records with fraudulent notarization, fake W-9 forms with vendor names that didn't exist, Ray Mitchell's sworn affidavit detailing 28 months off-structured transactions, Dr. Carol Fenton's handwriting analysis, Kevin Rudd's deposition, the DNA lab certification with unbroken chain of custody, Mrs. Bowden's affidavit. 4 pages of observations from a woman who'd watched my family from across the street for 31 years, and Harold's letter authenticated by Margaret. Diana coached me for the witness stand. You're not arguing, she said. You're reading a balance sheet. Do exactly what you do every day at work. I practiced. Calm voice, clear answers, point to the exhibit, let the numbers speak. My boss, Jan, called that week. There's talk in town, she said. People are asking questions about your family. Stanton was small. 4 degrees of separation, maybe 3. Word traveled through church committees and hardware store checkout lines faster than any filing reached the courthouse. Linda had hired an attorney, Philip Brock, local, aggressive, known for estate challenges. He filed a motion to dismiss, arguing the trust was created under undue influence by me over Grandpa during his final years. I read the motion at my kitchen table. Undue influence by the granddaughter who changed his bedsheets, heated his soup, and filed his taxes while his son's wife was forging his signature on bank transfers. Diana said, "He's reaching." The trust was created 15 years ago when Harold could still swing a hammer. A physician's letter confirms competency at every update. Then let him reach. I said. Mrs. Bowden called me on a Sunday after church. "Honey, Linda's been telling people you're contesting your grandfather's wishes, that you're trying to steal the house out from under your own parents." I started to explain. I know it's not," she said. "I watched you drive to that house every single day for 3 years. Winter, summer, that awful ice storm in February. I never once saw Linda." She paused. "But I did see her twice. Both times she came with file boxes and left without them. And once I saw your cousin Derek out there with a measuring tape walking the property line. Mrs. Bowden was 74. She'd been a school secretary for 30 years. The kind of woman who noticed when a child wore the same shirt 2 days running or a parent signed the wrong name on a permission slip. She missed nothing. "I'd like to testify if it helps," she said. "I may be old, but my eyes work fine and me memories better than most." Diana added her to the witness list. Character witness for the kind of caretaker I'd been. Timeline witness for the kind of activity Linda and Derek conducted at the house. 2 days later, Derek called me. First time we'd spoken since the funeral. "'Cause you really want to do this. Think about Uncle Robert. Think about what comes out." There it was, the threat. He thought I didn't know about the DNA. He thought it was leverage, that the fear of Robert's secret being exposed would make me fold. "I've thought about it," I said. I hung up. Derek had just played his last card. He didn't know I was holding the whole deck. The night before the pretrial conference, Robert called. His voice was rough, late-night rough, the kind that comes with whiskey or crying or both. "I can't stop her," he said. "I know. If this goes to court, everything comes out. Everything." "I know that, too." A long silence. I could hear him breathing. Somewhere behind him, a door closed. Linda, probably, moving through the house that wasn't hers. "He knew, didn't he?" Robert said. "Your grandfather. He knew about me." I'd prepared for a lot of scenarios. I'd practiced financial testimony with Diana. I'd rehearsed presenting exhibits. But I hadn't prepared for my father asking me at 11:30 at night if the man who raised him knew he wasn't his son. "He knew," I said, "and he chose you anyway." The silence stretched. I heard Robert set something down, a glass maybe. "I don't deserve that." "Maybe not. But he gave it to you anyway." That's who he was. He hung up without promising anything. No commitment to testify, no commitment to stop Linda. Just the click of a deadline and the faint sound of his truck starting in the background, which meant he was at the old office again, drinking alone in a building with his father's name on the window. I sat on my bed in apartment 3B. The pocket watch on my nightstand ticked steady. I didn't sleep. I went over the numbers one more time. Not because I needed to, but because numbers were the thing I trusted and people lately were not. The pretrial conference was at 9:00 a.m. Whatever Robert chose, I'd be there. Augusta County Circuit Court. Courtroom 2. Judge Martha Hensley presiding. 50-ish, no nonsense, the kind of judge who read every filing before the hearing started. Philip Brock opened for Linda. He stood at the lectern with his sleeves rolled and his voice calibrated for sympathy. "Your Honor, this trust was created during a period when Harold Palmer was vulnerable. His granddaughter Tessa Palmer was his sole caretaker and had unrestricted access to a man suffering from progressive Parkinson's disease. We believe the trust instrument reflects undue influence, not Harold Palmer's genuine wishes." Diana stood. "No dramatics. Your Honor, the trust was established 15 years ago when Mr. Palmer was 70 years old, fully competent, and still running a construction company. It was witnessed by 3 independent parties and notarized. It was updated once, 2 years before Mr. Palmer's death, during a documented competency window confirmed by his primary care physician. We have the physician's letter. She held up the exhibit binder. We're prepared to present the original trust instrument along with evidence of extensive financial irregularities in the management of Mr. Palmer's estate by the petitioner. Judge Hensley looked at Brock. I'll need to see the original trust instrument at the evidentiary hearing. I'm also ordering both parties to provide full financial accounting of any estate assets they've accessed, transferred, or managed during the past 3 years. Brock hesitated. Behind him, Linda leaned forward and whispered urgently. Brock said the petitioner would prefer to limit discovery to full accounting, counselor. Both sides. Evidentiary hearing is set for October 14. Linda's face when the judge ordered mutual accounting was the first crack I'd seen. Small. A tightening around the eyes, the jaw setting half a degree, but I recognized it. It was the face of a woman whose system had just been audited. I learned what happened next through court filings and depositions. Derek called Linda the night after the pretrial conference. They're going to pull the property records, he said. My name is on the notary chain. Kevin's name is on the notary chain. This isn't just a civil dispute anymore, Linda. Hold your nerve, she said. We'll say Harold authorized everything verbally. Verbal authorization from a man with Parkinson's who couldn't hold a pen. That's not going to fly. Kevin Rudd, the notary, Derek's buddy from the office, made his own phone call. Not to Derek, to a criminal defense attorney. Kevin's lawyer contacted Diana within 48 hours offering what lawyers call cooperation. Kevin would provide a sworn statement confirming that Derek had asked him to notarize the property transfer documents without Harold being present. In exchange, Kevin wanted assurance that the Commonwealth attorney would consider his cooperation when deciding charges. He's flipping, Diana told me. Derek's notary is going to testify that the signatures were forged. Derek drove to Stanton. I imagine the scene based on what Robert later described. Derek in the kitchen of Grandpa's house, packing. Linda at the counter, Robert at the table. You said this was simple, Derek said. In and out, nobody gets hurt. Nobody was hurt, Linda said. We're family, that money was always supposed to be ours. Tessa's family, too, Derek said. Linda picked up her coffee cup. Tessa is a bookkeeper with a grudge. Robert, quietly from the table, she's our daughter. Linda didn't respond. She sipped her coffee and changed the subject to the hearing date, as if Theward daughter was something she could schedule around. Diana's office, 1 week before the hearing. We did a final walkthrough of every piece of evidence we planned to present. The Snorts Trust instrument, 15 years old, ironclad, physician-certified competency at every update. Ray Mitchell's forensic accounting affidavit, 47 pages tracing $420,000 from Harold's accounts to Linda's. 11 forged authorization documents with Dr. Carol Fenton's handwriting analysis, concluding the signatures wearing consistent with Harold's known handwriting. Property transfer records showing 2 parcels worth $420,000 moved to Linda's name with forged notarization. Kevin Rudd's sworn statement confirming he notarized the transfers without Harold present. Derek's commission records showing $42,000 in payments from Palmer Family Holdings, LLC. The DNA lab results with certified chain of custody, Mrs. Bowden's affidavit, and Harold's letter, authenticated by Margaret, who would testify in person. Deanna closed the binder. This isn't a case anymore, she said. This is an audit with a gavel. Margaret would testify about the trust in Harold's instructions. Ray Mitchell would present the financial analysis. Dr. Fenton was available by video deposition. Mrs. Bowden had pressed her church dress and told me she'd be in the front row. I touched the pocket watch in my jacket. It was warm from my body heat, the way it used to be warm from Grandpa's. Let's go, I said. The hearing was on a Tuesday in October. The maples along Route 250 were turning red. The deep, honest red that comes only when the nights get cold enough to strip away everything a tree doesn't need. Augusta County Circuit Court, Courtroom 2. Wood-paneled walls, fluorescent lights, an American flag that needed ironing. The kind of room where property disputes and custody battles played out every Tuesday while the rest of Stanton went to work. Left side, Diana Walsh at counsel's table, me beside her. The cedar chest on the table entered as Exhibit A. Margaret Caldwell behind us, silver hair, gold glasses, hands folded on her lap. Ray Mitchell beside her with 2 copies of his report. Right side, Philip Brock, yellow legal pad, pen clicking. Linda next to him in navy blue, posture rigid, pearls again, the same pearls from the funeral as if reputation could be worn like jewelry. Robert at the end of the table, gray face. He stared at the wood grain and didn't look up. Derek sat in the first row of the gallery, closest to the exit. His foot bounced. Mrs. Bowden was in the second row, church dress, bifocals, sitting straight as a fence post. A reporter from the Stanton News Leader had a notebook open on her knee. 4 community members I recognized from Grandpa's funeral were scattered in the back rows. Not a packed courtroom. Intimate, which made it worse for the people with something to hide. Judge Hensley entered, we stood. She sat, we sat. This is the evidentiary hearing in the matter of the estate of Harold James Palmer. Petitioner is Linda S. Palmer. Respondent is Tessa A. Palmer, appearing through counsel. Diana stood. Your Honor, we'd like to begin with the trust instrument. Brock was on his feet immediately. The validity of any alleged trust is exactly what we're here to challenge. Judge Hensley looked at him over her glasses. I'll hear the instrument first, then the challenge. Proceed, Ms. Walsh. Diana called Margaret Caldwell to the stand. Margaret testified for 40 minutes. She described the trust's creation 15 years ago at Harold's request, funded by the proceeds from selling Palmer and Sons construction and decades of careful investment. Irrevocable. Tessa Palmer named as sole beneficiary. Harold was 70 years old at the time of execution. A physician's letter confirming cognitive and legal competency was attached to the original document. 3 independent witnesses, Margaret's paralegal, a bank officer, and Harold's longtime accountant had all signed. Brock cross-examined. It true you have a financial interest in the outcome of this trust? Margaret's response was precise. I'm the trustee. My fee is set by the instrument at a rate approved by the beneficiary and the court. I have a fiduciary interest, counselor, not a financial one. Brock sat down. Diana called Ray Mitchell. The projector hummed to life. Ray's spreadsheets filled the screen. Columns of dates, amounts, account numbers, vendor names. He walked the court through 28 months of transactions. $342,000 from Harold's personal accounts to 3 accounts controlled by Linda. $78,000 through Palmer Family Holdings, LLC. Fake vendor names that didn't correspond to any registered business in Virginia. W-9 forms generated on a home computer. The metadata timestamps matching the device registered to Linda's email address. 17 charges labeled Medicare supplemental processing that no Medicare plan had ever assessed. Then, the property transfers. Dr. Carol Fenton's video deposition played on the courtroom monitor. Her conclusion was clinical. The questioned signatures are inconsistent with known exemplars. The tremor patterns present in authenticated samples from the same time period are entirely absent from the questioned documents. In my professional opinion, these signatures were not produced by Harold J. Palmer. Kevin Rudd's sworn statement, read aloud by Diana. Mr. Whitfield asked me to notarize the documents. Mr. Palmer was not present. I was told he had signed them earlier at home. I did not verify. Derek's face drained. He whispered something to Brock, who ignored him. Linda sat rigid, jaw locked, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Judge Hensley removed her reading glasses and looked directly at Brock. Counselor, does your client wish to respond to the accounting discrepancies? Brock straightened his tie. We need additional time to review the forensic. You've had 30 days, counselor. Diana stood again. Your Honor, there's one additional piece of evidence relevant to the petitioner's standing. The petitioner's case rests partly on the assertion that Robert Palmer, as Harold Palmer's only son, is the rightful primary heir, and that Ms. Tessa Palmer, as a granddaughter, has a subordinate claim. She handed a folder to the clerk. This is a certified DNA analysis performed 18 months before Harold Palmer's death at his request through his personal physician. Chain of custody is documented. Diana read the summary. The analysis concludes with 99.98% certainty that Robert Allen Palmer is not the biological child of Harold James Palmer. The courtroom shifted. Mrs. Bowden's hand went to her mouth. The reporter's pen stopped. In the gallery, one of the old carpenters from Grandpa's crew shook his head slowly. The way you do when something you have suspected turns out to be true. Robert didn't explode. He didn't stand up. He didn't deny it. He sank into his chair like a building settling into its foundation. His hands went flat on the table. His face was the color of old cement, and then he said it, almost to himself. Quiet enough that the court reporter leaned forward to catch it. He knew. He always knew, and he still kept me. For 1 second, the courtroom was completely still. I looked at my father and saw something I hadn't expected. Not the man who signed documents without reading them. Not the man who stood behind the screen door while I carried a cardboard box to my car. I saw the boy Harold had chosen to raise. The boy who'd spent his whole life trying to earn a place he already had. Then Linda grabbed his arm. Don't say another word. And the moment broke. Brock scrambled. Your Honor, the DNA evidence is irrelevant to inheritance rights. Under Virginia law, a child raised by a parent has the same legal standing regardless of biological relationship. This is a distraction. Diana nodded. We agree, counselor. We're not arguing Robert Palmer has no legal standing. We're demonstrating that the petitioner's characterization of this family, that they are Harold Palmer's sole legitimate heirs, and that Tessa Palmer is an outsider who manipulated a sick old man, is fundamentally dishonest. Harold Palmer knew the truth about Robert's parentage. He chose to raise him anyway. He also chose, over 15 years and with full legal competence, to entrust his legacy to the one person who proved she deserved it. Not through blood, through conduct. She turned to face Linda. The petitioner did not care for Harold Palmer. She did not visit him. She did not feed him or read to him or balance his accounts. What she did was forge his signature, create fictitious vendors, structure financial transactions to avoid federal reporting thresholds, and file a fraudulent probate petition under oath. Linda couldn't hold it. She was on her feet before Brock could stop her. This is ridiculous. That girl sat in his house and turned him against his own son. She's a bookkeeper. She doesn't deserve Mrs. Palmer. Sit down, Judge Hensley said. Linda didn't sit, her voice pitched higher. She poisoned him against us. She took advantage of a sick old man who didn't know what he was. I spoke. I didn't raise my voice. I used the same tone I use when I'm reading audit findings to a client who already knows the numbers are bad. He didn't feel sorry for me. He felt sorry for you. Linda stopped. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. The courtroom was silent except for the scratch of the reporter's pen and the pocket watch ticking against my ribs. Judge Hensley said, "Sit down, Mrs. Palmer. I won't ask again." Linda sat. Her hands were shaking. Not like Robert's, not with grief or shame, with rage. The kind that comes when the story you've been telling yourself for 30 years gets read back to you by someone who checked the receipts. Judge Hensley issued her ruling from the bench. The irrevocable trust was valid. Established during documented competency, properly witnessed, legally binding. The property transfers were void. Forged signatures, fraudulent notarization, fiduciary breach. She ordered full restitution of all misappropriated funds. She referred the criminal evidence to the Augusta County Commonwealth Attorney's Office for investigation. Brock didn't appeal. Linda sat motionless while the ruling was read. Derek was already gone. He'd slipped out during the DNA testimony and hadn't come back. The hallway outside the courtroom smelled like floor wax and old radiators. I was walking toward the exit, the sedarchist under my arm, when I heard footsteps behind me. Tessa, I stopped. Robert stood 3 ft away. His tie was loose. His eyes were red. I signed what she told me to sign. His voice cracked on sign. Every paper, every form, I didn't ask what they were. I just signed. Why? I asked. Because she said if I didn't, she'd tell everyone about me, about who I really am. I looked at my father. Grandpa knew Dad. He always knew. And he never stopped calling you his son. Robert broke. Standing in that courthouse hallway under fluorescent lights in front of a water fountain and a bulletin board advertising jury duty, my father cried for the first time since I was a child. I didn't hug him. I didn't forgive him. But I didn't walk away either. I stood there, holding the chest Grandpa built until he was done. That was the last time we stood in the same room for a long time. The Commonwealth Attorney's office moved efficiently. Linda was charged with financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult under Virginia Code Section 18.21781, forgery and obtaining money by false pretenses. She took a plea. 18 months suspended sentence, 3 years of supervised probation, and full restitution of $420,000. No jail time, but a felony record that would follow her through every background check for the rest of her life. Derek was charged with forgery and conspiracy. His plea got him 12 months suspended and the permanent surrender of his real estate license. His wife filed for divorce before the sentencing hearing. Kevin Rudd lost his notary commission and was barred from seeking reinstatement for 10 years. Robert cooperated with the investigation. He wasn't charged. The Commonwealth Attorney determined his involvement was passive. He had signed documents under duress, and his cooperation helped build the case against Linda. He moved out of Grandpa's house and into a studio apartment on the west side of Stanton. He filed for divorce. The last I heard, he was working maintenance at a storage facility off Interstate 81. The house was returned to the trust. The 2 parcels of land were restored. I didn't move into Grandpa's house. I kept my apartment in Harrisonburg, 600 square feet above the dry cleaner, the place that was mine before any of this started. 6 months after the hearing, I used a portion of the trust to establish the Harold Palmer Community Foundation. The mission was simple: scholarships for trade school students in the Shenandoah Valley. Carpentry, electrical, plumbing, the work Grandpa believed in. The first class had 8 students. The foundation office was Grandpa's old workshop at the construction building on Route 250. I had it renovated. New wiring, new plumbing, fresh paint on 3 walls. The 4th wall I left alone. Original wood paneling, scuffed and stained, still carrying the ghost of sawdust in its grain. Robert and I don't speak. It isn't forgiveness and it isn't punishment. It's distance. Some doors close quietly. Linda and I have a restraining order. Some doors need locks. Mrs. Bowden came to the foundation opening. She brought a lattice-top peach pie and wore the same church dress she'd worn to the hearing. She stood in the workshop, looked at the 8 students sitting in folding chairs and said, "Your grandfather would be proud." I said, "He'd say I overworked the budget." There's a pocket watch on my desk now, sterling silver, worn smooth. It snorts, sits next to the cedar chest on the shelf behind me in a workshop that smells like fresh paint and old wood. Grandpa wrote it in his letter, and I'll say it one more time. Blood doesn't make you family. What you do when nobody's watching does. I didn't inherit $20 million. I inherited a standard. That's my story. 1 wooden chest, 1 stubborn accountant, and a grandfather who built things that lasted even after he was gone. If this story reminded you to check who holds power of attorney over someone you love, take that as a sign. Do it this week. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share this video. Thank you for being here. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.